Emily, hey, how are you?
Hey, nice to see you.
Good to see you. How's it going?
Very well, thank you. How are
Oh,
you?
very good, very good. Where are you out of?
I'm in Connecticut.
Oh, awesome, great, great state. And your college, Sarah Lawrence, there's some famous people that went there. Oh my
Yes,
goodness.
yes, we have a very illustrious crew of alumni.
Oh my gosh, some big stars. Is there like a drama program there or
Yes, we're very well known for our theater program, theater, music, dance, fine arts. And then it's sort of a perfect combination for students because they can get a conservatory experience, but they also can have the experience of getting a BA.
and then you're right by New York City, like the
Yeah, it's perfect.
capital of the world, and so it makes a lot of. I just Googled it, and I'm like, oh, usually there's one or two famous people that went there. There was like a dozen. I'm like, this is crazy who went there. That's really, really excellent. No, real impressive. And thank you for a copy of the book. I really appreciate it. And it's just the have a I'm a business was a business major back in the day, but just over the last like decade or so, really got an interest in ancient philosophy and just ancient wisdom, trying to bring ancient wisdom into the modern world, and was lucky enough to have like Donald Robertson.
Yes,
Yeah,
I saw that interview. That was lovely. I
oh,
really enjoyed that.
he's such a great guy. I had him on like three times, and he's
I
such
thought
a
I need to cultivate that Scottish accent. I love his
oh,
accent.
he sounds like William Wallace or something, right? It's
Right?
so good. And he's amazing. And then Robin Waterfield, are you familiar with his
Yes,
work?
of course.
Yeah, yeah. And he was amazing. And I had a Ryan Holiday's researcher. His name's Billy Oppenheimer, and he's Ryan Holiday's main researcher. And I had him on, and it's just amazing how you could take something from 3,000 years ago and the principles, like the fashion, the technology, and maybe the language has changed, but the principles and the life lessons remain the same, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Awesome. What we do, how about this? How about we get started? I'll go off of pretty much the questions I kind of my prep work that I did for this, like the questions I came up with. And then we can just let the conversation go wherever it is from those questions. We can explore like interesting stuff. And then also too, I would love for you to talk maybe towards the end. I'll ask a question. The Iliad and the Odyssey, maybe just like the average person, what they need to know, like just who they are, like where they came from, why they're still relevant today, and maybe you could give like a broad overview of just why they're so epic and why people still talk about them 3, 4,000 years later. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, they may come in a little bit earlier
Oh,
because
cool.
Herodotus is drawing on them. They were his predecessors. And so he's sort of reacting to them as well. And some of
Awesome.
the ideas that he develops, we can see them in embryonic form in the Iliad and the Odyssey
Oh,
also.
so great. And just want to make sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Emily Katz Anhalt.
Yes,
Is that correct?
yes.
Cool. I'll call you doctor the first time, and then I'll just call you Emily the rest of the way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, call me Emily. My husband is doctor.
Okay. That's all. Let's do that. All right. Emily, I appreciate you. Let's get going. Emily Katz Anhalt, welcome to Built Not Born.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, it's such an honor to have you on. Emily, for those who may not be familiar with you and your work, who are you and what do you do?
So I am a professor of classical languages and literature at Sarah Lawrence College. I teach ancient Greek and Latin and literature and translation courses. I'm interested in the ancient world and I'm interested in what the ancient world has to say to us today.
Doing some research on you. I was looking at some of the classes you take, and it's some of them scare me. Advanced ancient Greek, I might have to pass.
That's the goal. Fear. It's all about the fear.
Oh my gosh, crazy. What I love to do, I would love to dive into your latest book. Thank you for an advanced copy. Ancient Wisdom for Polarizing Times, Why Humanity Needs Herodotus, the man who invented history. Let's start it here. First off, Emily, who was Herodotus? I think some people call him the father of history, and why is he still relevant today?
So Herodotus was an ancient Greek prose writer. He was writing in the 440s and 430s BCE, and he introduced a distinction between myth and history. He was the first person to say, you know, those stories we've been telling ourselves for centuries, these tales of the Trojan War and Helen of Troy and Achilles and Odysseus, these stories happened too long ago for it to be possible to verify them. We can't look at any evidence to corroborate these stories. So he sort of drew a line in the sand and he said, I'm going to write about more recent events. And I'm going to draw on things I've seen myself or heard from eyewitnesses, or I can find material evidence that can corroborate them. And he called his project Historiae, which he defined as an investigation into the facts so as to make a moral assessment, to make a rational evaluation of the evidence after you've gathered all the evidence. So we really owe our distinction between myth and history to his insight that in order for something to be true, it has to be verifiable and verified.
I have so many questions to ask you about ancient history. You could take what you just said, and it still doesn't happen today. Like
Well, this was my impetus for doing this book. I'm concerned and increasingly concerned in the last few years that we're losing that distinction between myth and history. All of my work really centers on the role that narratives play in shaping our attitudes and aspirations. And fiction can be very illuminating, but we have to be determined to preserve that distinction between fiction and fact. So I wanted to go back to the origins of that distinction. Prior to Herodotus, and even during his own lifetime and after, many of the Greeks just thought of these ancient stories as their own history. That was their long ago past. And it wasn't until he drew that line in the sand that our conception of history could emerge.
The oldest literature I can think of is the Iliad and the Odyssey. Is he kind of pushing back on those stories?
Yeah, he's drawing on them because those stories were introduced themes and issues that he's also employing in his work. But different people tell different versions of those stories. The tragedies, for example, which were hundreds of years later than the Iliad and the Odyssey, are reinterpreting many of the same stories that we can see already in the Iliad and the Odyssey. And Herodotus is just like, we can't know which of these stories happened this way or that way. So I'm going to write about what I do know. And he focused very much on empirical evidence. He's also called the father of history. But as you point out, he's also accused of being a liar. So Cicero called him the father of history. Plutarch denounced him as a liar and a fabricator. And ironically, in introducing this difference between myth and history, Herodotus simultaneously made himself a truth teller and a liar, because these are two sides of the same coin. Only once you have a conception of a narrative that is true because it is verifiable and verified, then anything else is by definition not true, not verified, not verifiable. There's a kind of a pun in the subtitle of my book, because Herodotus is the man who invented history. That is, many of his own tales, by his own criterion of verifiable and verified, many of his own tales don't pass that test. So he includes many fanciful, implausible stories that we define as impossible or implausible, using the very distinction that he introduced.
You mentioned in the book that like Herodotus lived in a world where people got their information from poets singing songs, like no fact checking, no sources, just stories. And some you can't believe, some you can. And that's just not that different from today. And I'm not taking a side at all, but if you turn on, I'll just take the two polar opposites. I'll take MSNBC on one side and I'll take Fox News on the other. They are both like you could watch them within the same like half hour and it's a completely different world each of them are given out. So like when like there is a Democrat leading the way, the Fox News is doom and gloom and the MSNBC is just flowers, rainbows and unicorns. Then as soon as the Republican comes in office, Fox News is the other side. Look how great this is. And then MSNBC's doom, gloom, apocalypse right now. And it switches as soon as the other side wins the election. It's so crazy that I don't believe either side. I don't even watch either side. I just can't do it because it's a waste of time. But you said no fact checking. Like when you turned the news on, like when I was little, like 30, 35 years ago, and you had like Peter Jennings on, or you had even before me, like Walter Cronkite. It was like the same story if you put on ABC, NBC, or CBS. It was relatively the same news. You put it on now, you have no idea. Like it's two different worlds they're reporting. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah,
it's
and I think the other aspect of it is that the internet, the algorithms now are bringing us our preferred narratives.
yeah,
So the people who watch Fox News don't even know what's going on MSNBC, and the people who watch MSNBC don't even know what's going on Fox News.
no idea. It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
so crazy. And like, there's people in our family that are on one side, and we have people in the family on the other side. And then, like that once a year, like at Thanksgiving, when they get together, they don't yell at each other, but they live in different worlds. They start talking about one side is how the world's about to end. The other one's like, yeah, I can't believe how good it is now. And it's like, it's crazy. I'm like, you guys live in the same country? Like, let alone like they live like 20 minutes away from each other and they have completely different perspectives of what's going on in the world. Like, it's so crazy because one only gets their news from one side and one only gets the news from the other, and they don't cross pollinate, which is they'll never pick up a book from someone they disagree with. And that's one thing I learned from Ryan Holiday, right? I think he's one of the guys that really popularized ancient history over the last couple of years. He forces you to pick up books from authors you don't agree with just to get an idea of what goes on in their heads. And like you pick up a book from a politician that maybe you didn't vote for and you read their biography or their story, and it's like, I don't completely agree with this, but I could see where they're coming from. Does that make sense? It kind of like softens the edges a little bit. What do you
Well,
think?
one of the things I love about Herodotus is that he recognized that we tend to see the world through our own eyes, our own subjective experience colors how we see the world, and we tend to define the world as self versus other or self and other. And he had the genius, I would say, to recognize that we ourselves are other people's other. And his openness to learning from other ways of being in the world, other ways of thinking, other ways of telling stories, he models that for us. And I think that's a very healthy, constructive way to approach these divergent narratives. It's very problematic in 2025 because these digital platforms really don't invite us to explore other ways of being in the world. They simply they give us affirmation rather than information.
Yeah.
And Herodotus really is an example of someone who traveled widely to learn how other people think and how they act and what they do. And he had the sense to say, well, other people do things better than Greeks do, and the Greeks do some things better than other people. And the only way you're going to know and be able to assess your own certainties is by encountering other people's certainties and examining them and evaluating them on their merits.
What were some of the approaches that were like novel that he did to like investigating what happened? Like, so what did he do that people before him did not?
Well, he started out as an ethnographer and a geographer. So he traveled widely, probably not as widely as he claims to have traveled. He's a bit of an unreliable narrator, which is also very useful because we need to take every narrative with a grain of salt, even his own narratives. And he talked to people. He does violate his own sort of distinction between myth and history in that a lot of the tales he tells happened 100 or 200 years before his own time. So he can't have found any eyewitnesses for that. What he's reporting is what other people say. And sometimes he's not as judicious or discriminating as we might think he should be. When Egyptians tell him about winged snakes, he's
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, that's what they have in Egypt. But at other times he'll just say, well, this is what the people of Corinth say, and this is what the people of Lesbos say, and I don't know which of these accounts is true. So he leaves that sort of up to the reader to evaluate. Other times he lines up a few stories that are dissimilar and he weighs in. He said, well, I think this version is probably more accurate for these reasons. So he's sort of modeling how to do historical investigation and how to assess the accuracy of any narrative.
Someone always has to go first, and he did it 400 years before like Christ. That is so crazy. You write that Herodotus shows how to tell the difference between the stories that enlighten, like enlightenment versus stories that deceive. Can you give us any examples of this?
So one of the stories that he tells is, oh, and I should sort of preface this by saying, coincident with this distinction between myth and history, the Athenians were experimenting with the world's first ever democratic political institutions. And they had like a 300-year movement away from autocracy and rejecting tyrannical abuses of power. And they were now experimenting with a broader political participation. We can't admire it too much because they remained misogynistic and they kept slaves and they were brutal to other citizen communities. But nevertheless, and that actually doesn't distinguish them because most cultures throughout history shared those traits. But this novel idea that they could have a power sharing system with democratic institutions. And I think Herodotus sort of suggests how vital it is to have some agreement on basic facts. If we can't agree on basic facts, then we're not able to persuade each other using words. And of course, democratic decision making requires the use of verbal arguments rather than violence and intimidation. So that was one of my concerns in writing the book, that this modern moment where we live in different worlds, as you say, you have your reality, I have my reality. We have no means of communicating with each other, no means of sharing ideas or exchanging opinions. And Herodotus really recognized how important it was to be able to talk to one another and distinguish a true story from a deceptive one. And one of the tales he tells is of the tyrant Pisistratus in Athens. When he returned to power at one point, he costumed a very tall woman as Athena, the goddess Athena, and he put her next to him in a chariot, and he rode into Athens, and he sent heralds ahead of him saying, the goddess Athena herself is escorting the tyrant back into power, and you should accept his authority. And Herodotus, the historian, says, she wasn't Athena, she wasn't a goddess, she was just a very tall woman pretending to be Athena. So part of what the historian can do is strip away the facade of that kind of authoritarian deception. I should say also that that might have been a ritual reenactment. Athena was the patron goddess of Athens, so it might have been kind of a ritual thing, but Herodotus describes it as a deception that cost the Athenians their freedom, and he ridicules the Athenians for being susceptible to it, for being gullible and falling for the trick.
And you laugh at that. Wow, who would think there's a god in a chariot? Like how uneducated they were 3,000 years ago. But people would look at us 500 years from now and the stuff that we believed. They would laugh at us that we're just like them. Like it's crazy
Well, and
what
part of the problem is that for us, the Greeks attributed many natural phenomena to divine sources that couldn't be explained. It rains because Zeus wants it to rain, or it thunders because Zeus thunders. But we're a little bit in the same boat in the sense that most of us don't know how an iPhone works or an airplane. We kind of have to take that on faith. The crucial thing, though, that Herodotus did was the epics, and I know you wanted me to talk about the epics a little bit later, but the source of the stories in the epics is a divine source, a supernatural source. It's the goddess, the muse of epic poetry. Herodotus made himself the source and authority of his own stories. So that meant you can challenge them. If a person is telling you this story, you can say, wait a second, that doesn't align with my experience of reality. If a goddess is telling you the story, you can't question it. So Herodotus made himself the guarantor of his stories, and that enables us to call them into question. Some of the ones that are more reliable, some of the ones that seem perfectly impossible.
maybe the two most famous things ever in literature, the Iliad and the Odyssey. The way it was explained to me that they're more like life lessons in a story. If you take of them like a life lesson of the Odyssey's maybe about hubris or one's about revenge. Like you could take like how revenge just never works out. If you take it as that, they are just epic. It's epic literature that you could still learn from today. But if you take it as, oh, these are historical facts, it just loses. I don't know. How would you describe from taking it as an historical record to like just teaching life lessons?
So there may be some kernel of historicity to the epic tales. There may have been a Greek expedition against a city in Troy, but as Herodotus says, we can't know. It's too long ago. And certainly over the intervening centuries, those stories would have been embellished. So yeah, I think the way I think of these as just illustrative narratives that shape how the ancient Greeks saw themselves, what they aspired to. The focus, it's a little hard for us to see it because we often get sort of distracted by the presence of gods throughout these stories, but the focus in both of them is on human conduct. And that also was Herodotus's focus. What makes people do the things they do? What happens when they do them? We also kind of accept that there's a great deal of human experience that is not in our control, whether we call that divine will or fate or DNA. But what these stories encourage us to think about is that segment of human life that is in our control.
Mm-hmm.
And to think about conduct that will promote the likelihood of success and conduct that will make it harder for us to succeed or make it less likely that we will succeed. So these are, yeah, people kind of muddy the water by saying these are tales of gods and heroes. But hero, in my mind, is an empty box. It
Mm-hmm.
just signifies things that we admire. And so we may not all agree on what is admirable conduct. The characters in those stories think the most admirable thing you can do is help your friends and harm your enemies and display your capacities in battle, killing people.
Yeah.
But what the audience sees is that those are very short-sighted and reductive principles of human achievement. And in fact, there may be better ways of being in the world.
The Iliad and the Odyssey, right? So if you had to describe the Iliad to someone who heard of it but doesn't know much about it and give them like a 30-second to a minute, what's the Iliad and the Odyssey and how are they different? How are they the same? How would you describe them?
So the Iliad is a story of rage. It's a story about a warrior who becomes so enraged at his own people that he wishes them harm, and the harm ends up causing great suffering to him as well. The Greeks are encamped on the shores of Troy, and they are trying to recover Helen, who's been stolen by the Trojan prince Paris. And Achilles is part of this expedition, but he becomes so enraged at the leader of the expedition that he decides, I'm not fighting anymore. And he prays to the gods that they let the Trojans prevail for a time. So he actually wishes harm on his own people. And the Greeks suffer greatly when he's not fighting. And one of the casualties is his dearest friend. And once his friend is slain, he switches his anger from the leader of the Greek expedition to the killer of his friend. And he determines to get revenge no matter what. And he does get revenge. He kills the killer. But even that doesn't make him happy. He's still grieving for his lost friend, doesn't bring his friend back. He spends some time desecrating the body of his friend's killer. And only this very brief moment of empathy that he's able to share with the father, the bereaved father of his friend's killer, that's the thing that enables Achilles to resume his human life and go on living. So I think it's a story of rage and it's adverse consequences for the enraged person, but it's also a testament to the possibility of empathy, even between great enemies, and empathy as a much more healthful and therapeutic response than revenge. That's my nutshell of the Iliad.
Yeah. The Odyssey, if you had to do something, if you had to give a synopsis for
So
the
the
Odyssey.
Odyssey is the story of one man's wanderings as he experiences extreme vicissitudes of fortune. He goes from being a king to being a conquering warrior, then a shipwrecked sailor, and a destitute beggar, and finally a king once again. And his story really shows essential survival skills. What do you need to survive and thrive in the world? These are things like endurance, determination, cleverness, forethought, self-restraint. These are qualities that enable him to return and recover his family, his restore order in his community,
Mhm.
and recover his kingship, which we are told is a benevolent kingship. So these stories emerged at a time when democracy hadn't even been thought of. So the best option was a good king. That was the
Mhm.
best you could hope for. And we are told that Odysseus is such a man, he's a good king, but we have no confidence that his son, who will inherit his authority, if he can display his father's qualities. It's not automatic. He has to show that he is deserving of his father's authority, but there's no guarantee that he will be a good king. So that's one of the sort of problems that democracy is supposed to solve, the problem of political succession.
Both are attributed to Homer, correct?
Yes,
Do you believe there was a Homer and one person wrote these? What are your thoughts?
that is the Homeric question, what scholars talk about, the Homeric question, who was Homer? And if we have to think of Homeric epic poetry as a centuries-long tradition of poetic composition. So the question kind of boils down to, for me, who do you call Homer? The first oral poet who sang something hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, that eventually evolved into the Iliad and the Odyssey as we have them? Or do you call Homer the last poet in that line of succession who dictated the epics to a scribe who wrote them down? Because these stories, most scholars are pretty much in agreement that these stories were composed orally and transmitted orally for many centuries before they coalesced into what we have now as the Iliad and the Odyssey. And even after they coalesced sometime in the 8th century BCE, they were not written down until sometime in the 6th century. And we don't know exactly when that was. So they sort of were free to evolve for centuries before they took their fixed form in writing. And that enabled their ideas about admirable human conduct, abuses of power, the value of empathy, the costs of mistaking vengeance for justice. These ideas evolved over centuries. And what's crucial about both the epics is they didn't owe their existence to any divine or mortal authority. They probably were kind of dinner party entertainment. These stories would be a wealthy person would host a dinner party, and they would invite a singer to sing, and they would sing some piece or some story that that formed part of the monumental epics that have come down to us. So they were a little bit like a game of telephone. Not maybe that's too extreme, but they would evolve over time.
That is fascinating. Two more fun questions and we'll move on back to the book. If you had to pick one person or character, I think you have Achilles in the Iliad and you have Odysseus from the Odyssey. If you had to pick one of them to be a leader today or handle modern day problems, would you take like the warrior Achilles or like the problem solver like Odysseus? Who would you pick?
Oh wow, they'd both be terrible for different reasons. I definitely would not pick Achilles. Odysseus would be clever, but he's an opportunist and he's a con man.
Yeah,
So I think they're both counter models. This is why when we call them heroes, it's
yeah,
problematic for me
yeah.
because they are both really warning examples. They're antithetical poles. Achilles is the guy who believes you do what you have to do, no matter the cost. And that can be admirable in certain situations, but you better be very clear and very sure that your goals and your objectives are worthwhile. Odysseus is the guy who says you do whatever you have to do to survive, whatever you need to survive, whatever that takes. And that can be admirable too in certain situations. But the challenge is to figure out which of those methods is ideal for any given moment. And the deceptiveness of Odysseus, I think, is a very dangerous model for modernity.
They're both like ancient versions of Machiavelli. The prince, like just like the ends justify the means almost, right? A
Well,
little
yeah,
bit?
to some extent, but what's really fascinating to me about both of these stories is that the audience, the external audience epics, knows a lot more than the characters within the stories know. So we see them saying and doing and thinking things, but we see that some of their priorities don't turn out so well for them, and that some of their goals are really deeply problematic. So they're educating us, and we are not limited by the perspective of any of the characters within the stories.
So last semester, one of my sons studied abroad in Rome, and we went out and visited him, and we spent some time in Sicily. And while we were there, it was a big buzz. Christopher Nolan was there filming the Odyssey off the coast of Sicily. And there's all these videos. You see people in the town we're in was talking about it. And I guess it's coming out a year or two from now with all these big stars. What are your thoughts about how popular ancient poetry, how relevant it is today? What are your
I think
thoughts?
it's great. I love that people are interested in it. My current project, the new one that I'm working on, is the stories of Odysseus from epic and tragedy, because like my students come to my classes and they're fascinated by mythology, but they don't know the earliest versions of these stories. They only know the later ones. And every retelling is a reinterpretation, and
Mhm.
it tells you what the teller cares about and values. But I think it's vital to restore what the earliest versions of these stories were conveying, because they did help the ancient Greeks to move away from tyrannical abuses of power and toward more equitable and more just ways of being in the world. The Greeks never got there, but they introduced the ideals by which we judge their inadequacies and our own. So I think it's vital to go back. I think it's wonderful that people want to see Nolan's movie, and I'm going to go see it. But I think it's also important to think about that as a reinterpretation, and what were the original stories suggesting about the best ways to be in the world and some counterproductive ways of being in the world.
Getting back to the book, how about this question? If Herodotus time traveled today and say he grabbed an iPhone and he opened up Twitter or TikTok or YouTube, what would he recognize and what would just absolutely confuse him about what we're doing today?
I struggle with that question because I don't do social media.
Okay.
I think it's very unhealthy
Yeah,
and
sure.
very counterproductive. So I do stay away from it. I have some sense of I think TikTok would completely baffle him. The short attention span that it encourages and the flitting from one thing to another. He was able to concentrate and focus. So that encouragement of lack of focus, I think, would baffle him.
Mm.
Twitter, I think he would laugh about Twitter. He probably didn't know Aristophanes' play, The Birds, but Aristophanes in that play contrasts articulate human speech with the inarticulate tweets of birds. So the idea that human beings are now gleefully embracing Twitter, or I guess it's called X now, and abandoning articulate, lengthy, articulate, persuasive speech, I think Herodotus would find that pretty horrifying. What would he recognize? I guess he would recognize the efforts to deceive, because part of what he was very aware of and what his stories, and many of his stories show, is how dangerous it is to be deceived by surface appearances. Things look a certain way, you want them to be a certain way, you don't look beneath the surface. And I think Twitter and TikTok encourage us to just look at the surface of things and not see the reality beneath. The reality, for example, of digital platforms monetizing our attention span and trying to distract us and divert us from the things we really need to be thinking about.
So true. And this kind of goes right into the next question. What advice do you think he would give, or what type of ancient wisdom could be applied to the modern world, maybe to a regular everyday person like you, me, living in lack of focus, drowning in distraction, maybe exposed to a lot of misinformation? Like, what's maybe a specific habit or question Herodotus would tell us to practice daily that could make a difference, maybe to give us some clarity and focus?
I guess the big thing would be don't outsource your decision making. He wouldn't encourage unthinking allegiance to any person or dogma. Think for yourself. He really suggests that moral, critical, rational, evidence-based discernment, that's our best hope for survival. So always ask, who is telling me this? Why are they telling me this? What is their agenda? What evidence do they provide for this narrative? Beware of anyone who divides the world into friend and foe. That's the time-honored approach of authoritarians, and it really limits our ability to think for ourselves and make healthy decisions for ourselves. Many of his stories are about autocrats and the terrible things they do, not only to other people, but to themselves. He shows that when you have an unaccountable autocrat, he succumbs to his own impulses and his own whims, and he brings destruction on himself as well as everyone else. So I think he would warn against that. And part of that authoritarian appeal is a kind of closed-minded certainty. So he would be very wary of certainty. Keep an open mind, see what other people are saying, and never forget that they're human beings, that the people who disagree with you are human beings just like you.
Yeah, that's such a good point. When you bring the humanity back, like you can push back against ideas and concepts, but treat the person with respect, right? And I think that so much of that is lacking in today on both sides of the aisle.
And it derives from the fact that, as you pointed out earlier, we're inhabiting different realities. It's very hard to have a conversation with a person who disagrees with you if you can't even agree on sort of basic facts of the physical universe.
It's been building over the last couple decades. I think it went into overdrive during COVID when you started had
Yeah,
the
that
mask
accelerated
debate.
it.
Yeah, then you had the vaccine debate, the mask debate, then gather, don't gather, that kind of stuff. And then it just went crazy from there. Then the last couple presidential elections just been nuts. But yeah, it's crazy stuff. There's a quote you wrote in the book, and it's so much you mentioned about like you're not really educated on social media where you kind of the algorithm gives you more of what you believe in. And the great quote in the book you wrote, we all tend to see and believe what we want to see and believe.
Yeah.
And it's so true. I remember I was looking at like luggage like a couple months ago, and I went on a couple ads to look at some carry-on luggage. And all I got in my feed for like 3 days was luggage ads. And you would think luggage is the only thing sold on Amazon and the only most important thing in the world. Like it was luggage, it was bags, handbags, backpacks, like rollerboards. Like all I got in every feed, Google, Instagram, Facebook, was just luggage. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm afraid to look at an ad now because all you see is like that. And it's like the only thing in my life when I went on for 2 days was luggage stuff. And I'm like, dude, this is so crazy. Just,
What I think about that though is
yeah.
even if you buy a suitcase, you
Mhm.
keep getting those suitcase
It
ads.
keeps
And
coming.
I'm
Then it's
thinking,
backpack and
but that
rollerboards
but
and
that
sling
makes no
bags.
sense. That's the one thing that if you've already bought it, that's the one thing they know the algorithm should know that you've already bought it.
We're good. I
Why
need
would
one.
they
Yeah, I
why would you
bought it
want
and
to
I'm
know?
good. I just need one bag and like leave me alone. So funny. Emily, what I'd like to do is just transition to a part of the interview, a fun part of the interview we call Share Your Secrets. So
Okay.
our listeners can get to know you a little bit more as a person. Every author I've ever interviewed were huge readers. And they all had a favorite book somewhere down the line that just influenced them. What book most influenced your life or changed your mind?
So I would have to say it's Plato's Apology.
Okay.
I read it in college. It's Plato's account of what Socrates said to the jury when he was on trial for his life. And it's really a call to philosophical inquiry. And it's really a, a warning against thinking you know what you don't know. And Socrates points out in that speech that only when you recognize that you don't know something can you learn something. And that was really, eye-opening for me when I was in college. I suddenly thought, oh, wow, I don't know anything. So that means I'm in a great position to learn. And it really has been a very important guiding principle for me. We're all so certain nowadays. We
Mhm.
know what's right and wrong and what other people should do. And I think we're losing that capacity to see that things are more complicated than we're often willing to admit, and that we would have a better chance of surviving and thriving if we could acknowledge how complicated things are.
There's like a great quote. I train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but my mat's behind me. One of the things we say is as the island of your knowledge expands, so does the shoreline of your ignorance. It's just the more you learn, the more you understand you don't know. Like for everything
Exactly.
that I learned, I'm like, I have four more questions. It exponentially grows what I understand that I don't understand.
So this is a problem for scientists particularly, and this is why I think science is so denigrated in the modern world, but at all extremes of it. I don't think it's a one group or another. In general, I think people are disparaging of science these days because scientists know the most, so they know how little they know, and they're the least likely to be definitive. They're the ones saying, well, it looks like it's this way, but
Mhm.
it could be this way. And once we get new evidence, we'll have to reassess. I mean, that's how science works. But it means that they know how much they don't know, and they come across as less certain. Much
Mhm.
nicer to follow the guy who says, oh, I know this is right.
Yeah.
Just do what I say. So I think it's a problem for. And oh, the other thing I should mention is that Herodotus was also called the father of empiricism. He was really modeling that scientific process of assembling the evidence and trying to make a hypothesis based on the evidence and then revising that hypothesis if the evidence requires it. But he was applying that to human conduct, not to natural phenomena.
Makes sense. You mentioned about how, like with science, where they say it could go this way, it could go that way, and sometimes people don't like that uncertainty. I'm reading a book right now on Harry Truman. Mr. President, what do you need? He goes, what I need is a one-armed economist because all my economists go on one hand,
Yes,
this might happen, but if you do this, this might happen. Like they kept giving him like when we would ask like what should he do? They both said it could go either way, and he goes, I want a one-armed economist. It's so
brilliant,
funny. Yeah, it's
brilliant.
so funny. Before we move on, you mentioned Plato and Socrates for the average person, I'm talking me, if I always confuse the three, Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, what's a quick way to organize them? If you have
Okay,
just some
so
takeaways.
Plato was a friend of Socrates. Socrates never wrote a word. Anything we know about Socrates is what Plato wrote about him, and also another associate of Socrates was a man named Xenophon, and he also wrote about Socrates. Plato and Xenophon were 28 and 29 years old when Socrates was put to death by the newly restored Athenian democracy. And the speech that I mentioned, this apology, is the speech that he gave when he was on trial for his life. Aristotle was a student of Plato. So,
Gotcha.
and he started another school of philosophical thought. But Plato really introduced the discipline of moral philosophy.
Okay.
How do we know what's good?
And which one was Alexander the Great's like teacher? Wasn't one of
Aristotle. Aristotle.
Aristotle? So the last one, he
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
man, would be a fly on the wall with that. Aristotle and Alexander the Great. That would be wild. No, I appreciate that. Thank you. I feel like I should get 3 credits added to
Yeah.
my transcript on it. I
Absolutely.
need 3 more credits
Absolutely.
now. I feel better. I feel stronger now. How about this? Getting back to the fun questions. Emily, when you need to clear your mind and recharge your body, what do you do?
I like to go for a walk or a run in the woods, and that really lets my mind wander, and I can enjoy how beautiful it is, and I just let my mind think about whatever it wants to think about, and that's what really recharges me.
How great is that this time of year in the
Oh, it's
Northeast?
fabulous.
It's just
Uh,
like it's not hot, it's not cold, it's like 65, 70 degrees. The leaves are kind of turning, right? Like it's the time of year that like I'm out in California a lot for work, and Southern California is just amazing. But like September and October, I'll take the Northeast over there because it's
Where
just
are you now?
I'm in Philadelphia. I'm in
Ah,
Philly.
okay,
Yeah.
yes. We had a
Yes.
really dry summer, so we finally got a little bit of rain, and that's helping. But yeah, it's a beautiful time of year, so
Oh,
that
it's
really.
so great. It's so great. I love it. But getting outside and just moving is just so amazing. I agree with you there. How about this? Here's a fun question. Emily, if you could spend a day with anyone, alive or dead, famous or not famous, who would you spend the day with?
So that's easy. My parents. I miss
Awesome.
both of my parents, and they were wonderful. If that's too lame a
No,
response,
no, it's amazing. What would you do with them? Now, say they came back for a day. What would you do with them?
just go for a walk and a chat. Oh my goodness, that would be the best thing ever.
No, I hear you. It's funny, not funny, but my dad passed away recently,
Oh, I'm
and
sorry.
oh, thank you. And but like I understand that. I've asked this question for the 4 years of the podcast, and every now and then, Seth Godin, he's a marketing author. He's a real famous author, one of my mentors. That was his answer when he was on the podcast. His parents, and I got it, but didn't get it because I would see my parents all the time. But
Yeah,
now, like with when they're gone, I'm like, yeah, I could see how that would be the person, not Elvis or Jesus or whoever. Like it's like you want to hang out with your parents. It's so cool. So
well,
cool.
I mean, my dad died he was 63 when he passed away, which was really way too young.
Wow.
And my mom just passed away about 7.5 years ago. But yeah, I miss them. And the longer they're gone, the more you miss them. It's just, I did think I should say Socrates or something would be
Yeah.
the person I want to meet, but I think that would be a very awkward
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
He asked a lot of uncomfortable questions.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
So,
Understood. You wonder, you're with them, the real famous people, like, would they want to hang with you? Would they talk to you? Would they be, like,
yeah, I think
would they be
they
flippant? Like, you don't know how they would respond, but you know your parents, you'd go for a walk, go to lunch, have a great time, right?
exactly.
No, that's great. How about this? Wrapping this up here. This first off, Emily, thank you for all the knowledge. It's so great. Emily, if you could have everyone listening take just one lesson away from everything we discussed, what would that lesson be?
Boy, that's a tough one. But I guess it would be value people over things and never forget that the person who disagrees with you is a human being just like yourself.
Wow, that's so good. Value people over things and never forget that person's a human being. Wow, that's fantastic. Emily, this is the last question. It's if there's a crazy one, this is the crazy one. This is when I get the coolest answers though. Emily, if you had to get a quote or a saying tattooed on your body, what would that quote or motto say?
But first, I have to say, I'm not a big fan of tattoos. I think we have articulate speech. We should double down on that. But if you constrained me to get a tattoo, it would be gnoti sauton. And that is the ancient Greek for know yourself. And it was the inscription over the temple doorway, the temple of Apollo at Delphi. Know yourself in the sense, not in the pop psychology sense, but in the deep humane sense. That is, know that you are immortal, know that you will die, know that you are a human being, and that you cannot act like a divinity. You cannot act as if your actions do not have consequences. You know, gods are impervious to the consequences of their actions. They can't suffer, they can't die, but know that you are mortal and know that you will always be subject to the consequences of your choices, whether they're good or bad. So yeah, that would be it. Gnothi sauton.
Wow, noti salto, know yourself, know that you're human, know that you're mortal, know that you're going to die. I think know yourself is about as good as a spot as any to wrap this up. The guest is Dr. Emily Katz Anhalt. The book is Ancient Wisdom for Polarizing Times: Why Humanity Needs Herodotus, the man who invented history. Emily, if people are looking for you, your books, your work online, where can we find you?
Well, I'm in the process of having a website set up for myself, but they can go to the Sarah Lawrence website, Sarah Lawrence College, and they can find my faculty page, and the information will be there.
Awesome. I'll put that and I'll put the links to all your books
Oh, thank
online.
you.
Yeah, no,
Thank
I'll
you.
put all the links in the show notes. The book has a ton of wisdom. Emily, I'd like to thank you for joining us. Appreciate the education in the ancient classics. And hey, I look forward. And what's your next project?
So it's this Odysseus project, telling the tales of Odysseus as they emerge, as they appear in the epics and tragedies.
When do you think that will be released?
Oh, a couple of years.
Oh yeah, a couple of
Still in the works. Yeah.
it's like a great bottle
Not
of wine.
tomorrow.
It's got to be in the barrel for a little bit. But when that comes out, would you love to have you back on the show to
Oh,
talk
thank
about
you.
it?
I'd be delighted. It's an honor to speak with you. Thank
Uh,
you.
Emily, it's an honor to speak with you. Good luck with the book. Thank you for your time and appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. Great to talk with you.
And
Bye-bye.
cut. Oh, thank you. That was so good. That
Well, that
was
was fun.
excellent.
I really enjoyed that.
You were all you're so awesome. It was so much fun.
I
Thank
admire your jujitsu. I have to say, I did one weekend of jujitsu training, and I then I did karate for 5 years when I was
Nice.
younger.
Did
I
you?
loved it. I loved it, but my life got too busy.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic.
But
What did you think of jujitsu?
was it was the one of the Gracies
Yeah.
did a like a weekend clinic for faculty when I was teaching at Trinity College. This was years ago.
Do you remember which one? Do you remember which Gracie it was?
I don't,
Okay.
but I remember thinking it was so cool. And then I didn't have there was nothing nearby to do it.
Okay.
So I did a type of Tang Sudo karate.
Yeah,
I did.
fantastic.
I loved it.
That's
Absolutely loved it.
that is so great. Oh, I
But
love it. Thanks for sharing that.
so
It's a
I
great.
think it's so cool that you do it. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. What I'll do is give me a couple weeks to get this out. I'll edit it up, and before I do, so you're not on social media, you said?
No. Yeah.
Okay. What I'll do is I will share it and I'll get it out there and I'll send you the links to YouTube. I'll put it on YouTube. I'm going to
Oh,
create
thank you.
some reels. I created like a minute to 30, about 90-second reels of like really interesting parts of the conversation and I actually put them on TikTok and YouTube. And then some of them get a couple thousand views. So like
Oh, that's great.
it'll definitely get out there. I've been getting like maybe 4 or 5 thousand views a reel. So it'll definitely get some traction. And I'll put it out there. Hopefully sell some books. And if anything, educate people about the amazing ancient wisdom that we need more in our modern life.
Well, I really thank you for this opportunity and for, yeah, trying to get the word out.
No,
Very
you,
important.
well, thank you for your time. Good luck with everything. Keep doing amazing work. I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much. You too.
Emily, thank you. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Good luck with
You
everything. Bye
too.
bye.
Bye-bye.